Her grandmother left 41 cassette tapes. 40 of them were reminders. The 41st had a man's voice on it. The tape was labeled in her grandmother's handwriting, the careful block letters of someone who no longer trusted her own hand. It said, "Things T.O. remember, 34. Claire pressed play, expecting what she'd heard on the 33 tapes before it. Pills at noon. The blue door is the linen closet. George is gone. You don't have to wait up. Instead, her grandmother's voice came out small and clear and frightened. He came again last night, Edith said. He knew where the spare key used to be. We moved that key in 1991. Then a pause. Then, quieter, as if leaning closer to the recorder. He's very kind. That's the part one can't explain to anyone. The tape hissed for 9 more seconds and clicked off. Claire sat on the floor of the empty house and looked at the box. There were 7 tapes left. Edith had lived at the end of Mercer Road for 51 years. It was the last house before the road turned to gravel and then to nothing, a small white house with a porch that her husband George had screened in himself the summer their daughter was born. George had died 4 years ago. After that, Edith stayed on alone, the way people of her generation tended to, refusing every gentle suggestion that she move somewhere with people and elevators and a button by the bed. Claire was the granddaughter who lived closest, which meant 90 minutes by car. She came when she could. Not often enough. She knew that now, and the way you only know it afterward, standing in a house that smells like someone who is no longer in it. The dementia had arrived slowly and then all at once. For the last 2 years, Edith had a home care agency send aides during the day. Claire had set it up herself, over the phone, comparing 2 agencies on a spreadsheet at her kitchen table. 2 women came in rotation, mornings and early afternoons. They left detailed notes in a binder by the door. Claire had read every page of that binder 100 times and found it reassuring. Blood pressure, meals, mood, a small line of dignity recorded in someone else's handwriting. Edith died in March in a hospital of pneumonia, with Claire holding her hand and her mother on a video call from 3 time zones away. It was as good a death as those things are. Claire told herself that and mostly believed it. The house went to Claire to clear. Her mother couldn't fly in until summer. So on a Saturday in April, she drove the 90 minutes alone, let herself in with the key, and started the slow archaeology of a life. The drawers of rubber bands and twist ties, the closet of George's coats Edith had never given away, the freezer full of labeled soup. She found the box in the bedroom, on the high shelf of the closet, behind a stack of folded blankets. A shoebox, soft at the corners. Inside it, 41 microcassettes, the small kind, each one labeled in block letters. Things to remember, 1. Things to remember, 2. And so on. And underneath them, wrapped in a handkerchief, a handheld cassette recorder. George's. He'd used it for years to dictate letters and grocery lists, a man who liked his gadgets. Claire remembered it from childhood, the satisfying heavy click of the buttons. She understood it immediately, and it broke her heart a little. A person losing her memory had found a way to leave notes for herself. Not on paper. Paper gets lost. Paper requires you to remember to read it. But a voice, her own voice, telling her the things she could no longer hold. She must have played them back in the mornings. A self talking to a later self across the widening gap of the disease. Claire made a cup of tea in her grandmother's kitchen, sat down on the bedroom floor with her back against the bed, and started at tape 1. The early tapes were exactly what she'd expected, and they were almost unbearable. Tape 1 was Edith sounding nearly herself, brisk and a little embarrassed. Well, the doctor says I should try this. So, today is the 14th of October. You take the white pill in the morning and the 2 small ones at noon. The noon ones are the important ones. There's a chart on the refrigerator. If you're confused, the chart on the refrigerator is correct and you are not. That last line stopped Claire cold. The chart is correct and you are not. Her grandmother, building a structure she could trust because she'd stopped being able to trust herself. The tapes went on like that. Practical. Specific. The blue door is the linen closet. The good scissors are in the 2nd kitchen drawer, not the 3rd. Margaret from church comes on Wednesdays. You don't need to be afraid when you hear a car. Your daughter is in Oregon and she loves you and she calls on Sundays at 10. George is gone. George Is Gone appeared on 9 separate tapes, each time in a slightly different voice, sometimes flat and factual, sometimes thick, once barely above a whisper. Claire understood that one too. Some mornings Edith had woken up and reached across the bed. The aides appeared in the tapes by name. The girl who comes is called Denise. She's the heavy-set one. She's kind. The other one is Sandra. They are supposed to be here. Do not call the police when they come in. You've done that twice, and it's embarrassing. Claire matched the names to the binder. Denise. Sandra. It all lined up. The tapes were a parallel record, the inside of the same story the binder told from the outside. Then, around tape 19, the man appeared. It was a single line, almost thrown away. The man fixed the back step. I keep forgetting to thank him. Claire didn't think much of it. A handyman. Edith had always had someone for odd jobs, but he kept coming back. Tape 22. The man came after Denise left. He made tea. He takes it the way George did, the milk first. I'd forgotten anyone did it that way. Tape 24. I asked the man his name 3 times today, and 3 times he told me, and I'm sorry to say I've lost it again. He doesn't seem to mind. He says he doesn't mind. Tape 26 was the first one that made the back of Claire's neck go cold. I want to write this down properly while it's clear. The man comes in the evenings, after the agency girls have gone. He's been coming for some weeks now. He's very gentle. He knows where things are in this house. He knows where I keep the matches. He knew the back step was loose before I told him. I don't know how he knows these things. When I ask him, he says, "You told me, Edith." Maybe I did. I tell people all sorts of things and lose them. But I don't think I told him about the matches. Claire stopped the tape. She sat very still in the quiet bedroom. Late afternoon light came sideways through the window, full of dust. The house ticked the way old houses tick. She told herself the obvious things. Her grandmother had been ill. The disease invented people. She'd read that the way it could populate an empty house with visitors' conversations, whole relationships assembled out of fragments. The man could be a memory of George wearing a stranger's face. He could be a real handyman whose visits Edith had stretched and embroidered. He could be Denise's husband stopping by, or a meter reader, or no one. She believed all of that. It was a complete and reasonable set of explanations. She kept listening, and the tapes got worse. By tape 30, Edith was frightened, and her fear was specific in a way the disease usually wasn't. He knocks twice and waits, she said. Always twice, then he waits. I've started to listen for it. That's the part one don't like, that I listen for it now. That I'm glad when it comes. Tape 31. Denise asked me today who I'd been talking to. She found 2 cups in the sink. I told her I have a visitor in the evenings, and she got a look on her face and wrote something in the book. So now they think I'm worse. Maybe I am. But there were 2 cups, weren't there? Somebody used the second cup. Claire's hand was tight around the recorder. She had read that binder. She had read every page. And she remembered now. She'd skimmed past it as the disease talking. A note in Denise's handwriting from late January. Asterisk client reports an evening visitor. No evidence of same. Recommend discuss with family. Asterisk Claire had read that and felt the standard sad lurch and turned the page. She had not discussed it with anyone. There hadn't seemed to be anything to discuss. Tape 33. I asked him tonight to please tell me who he is plainly so I could keep it. He sat down across from me and he held my hands and he said, "I'm someone who looks after you." And I asked, "Are you from the agency?" And he said no. And I asked, "Are you family?" And he was quiet for a moment and he said, "I'm as good as family." And do you know, that frightened me and it comforted me at exactly the same moment. And I can't tell those 2 feelings apart anymore. The disease took the wall between them. Then 34, the one Claire had started with. Asterisk, he came again last night. He knew where the spare key used to be. We moved that key in 1991. Asterisk. She had 7 tapes left when she started that morning. Now she was down to the last 7, and the light was going, and she had not eaten, and she did not want to be in this house after dark, and she could not stop. She got up, turned on every light in the house, and stood in the kitchen drinking water from the tap. Then she did something she would think about for a long time afterward. She looked in the sink. It was empty and clean. Of course it was. The house had been closed up since March. She opened the cabinet where the cups were kept. She counted them. which was an insane thing to do, and she knew it. A full set, nothing missing. She went back to the bedroom and made herself keep going faster now because she wanted it to be over. Tape 35 was mostly silence and breathing. Then, if anyone ever finds these, if my daughter finds these or Claire, I want you to know I wasn't only confused. Some of it was real. I'm old and I'm sick and I know how that sounds. But some of it was real, and his name was... The tape ran out. The mechanism clicked. 35 seconds of nothing. Then the soft chunk of the recorder stopping at the end of the reel. Claire turned the cassette over in her hands. Side B was blank. She checked it twice. The name was not on side B. The name was nowhere. The tape had simply ended, mid-sentence, the way tapes do, indifferent to what they're carrying. She had 6 tapes left, and she did not want any of them. She didn't play the last 6 that night. She drove the 90 minutes home in the dark, the box of tapes on the passenger seat with the seat belt around it, which she also knew was insane, and she did not turn on the radio. In the morning, in daylight, in her own kitchen, she got practical, because there was a practical explanation, and she was a practical person, and she intended to find it. She called a home care agency. She asked directly whether any male staff had ever been assigned to her grandmother, a night aide, a fill-in, anyone. The woman checked. No, 2 aides, both female, daytime hours only, the contract Claire herself had signed. No one was authorized to be in that house after 4 in the afternoon. She called Denise. Denise remembered the cups, remembered the note. She talked about a man a lot. Those last months, Denise said gently, the way you speak to the recently bereaved. I never saw anybody. The disease does that, hon. My own mother had a whole family living in her attic that wasn't there. It feels real to them. It's not. It's not anything to be scared of. Claire wanted to believe her. She almost did. Then she went back to the house the following weekend, in the morning, on purpose, and she searched it properly. Not as a granddaughter clearing a house. As someone looking for a man. And she found him. In the desk in the spare room. In a checkbook ledger written in Edith's increasingly unsteady hand, there were payments. Cash withdrawals, mostly, but 4 checks across 5 months, each made out to a name. Paul. No last name in the ledger. The memo line said things like help and for the week, and once, simply, thank you. The amounts were small and kind-hearted and exactly the kind of thing a lonely old woman pays a person who is good to her. And tucked in the back of the same drawer, a man's reading glasses. Not George's. George had worn heavy black frames. Claire had a dozen photographs. She'd kept a pair. These were thin gold half-moons. And a phone number on the back of a church bulletin under the same name. Paul. She sat with that for a long time. And then the practical explanation assembled itself, clean and complete, and the relief of it nearly made her cry. A man named Paul. A neighbor, maybe someone from the church Edith still got driven to. A kind man who'd started checking on an old woman at the end of a road, who fixed her step and made her tea the way her husband used to, who came in the evenings when the agency had gone because the evenings are the loneliest part of the day for someone who has lost the person they used to spend them with. Someone Edith paid a little, out of pride, so it wouldn't be charity. Someone the disease had turned, in her frightened tapes, into a mystery because she kept forgetting his name, kept forgetting she'd invited him, kept waking each evening to a stranger who knew where the matches were. The matches he knew about because she'd told him. On some afternoon she didn't keep. The spare key from 1991 he knew about because she'd told him that too, the way the lonely tell their whole lives to anyone who'll sit still. There was no impossible knowledge. There was only an old woman who couldn't hold what she'd given away. It accounted for everything. The cups, the step, the gentleness, the as good as family. A good man doing a quiet good thing, badly understood by a failing mind and an agency that didn't know he existed. Claire called the number on the bulletin. A man answered. Older, soft-spoken, careful. When she said whose granddaughter she was, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said how sorry he was, and that Edith had been a fine woman, and that he'd wondered why the visits had stopped and hadn't liked to intrude on the family. He'd met her at the church, he said. He'd looked in on her Tuesdays and Thursdays. He'd made her tea. He confirmed the loose step, the milk-first tea, every gentle detail, in a voice you could not be afraid of. Claire thanked him. She meant it. She hung up and put her head down on her own kitchen table and felt something unclench that had been clenched for 2 weeks. It was a complete story. It had a name and a number and a face she could now imagine. It explained the tapes. She believed him. Then, because she was finally not afraid, she played the last 6 tapes. 5 of them were nothing. Fragments, dead air, a few more reminders. Edith near the end barely able to finish a thought. Asterisk the blue door. Take the George is asterisk the disease in its last work, sanding her down to single words. The 41st tape was different. It wasn't labeled things T.O. remember. It wasn't labeled anything. And when Claire played it, there was no reminder, no instruction, no message to a later self. There was just a room. The room tone of her grandmother's house. That specific quiet Claire knew now in her body. The refrigerator, the tick of the place, the distant nothing of the end of Mercer Road. The recorder had been left running on a table somewhere. For a long time, there was only that. Then 2 knocks, and a wait. Then footsteps, and a chair, and a man's voice, low and warm, saying her grandmother's name. Edith, and her grandmother's voice answering, not frightened, not confused, but easy glad, the voice of someone greeting somebody they'd waited for. There you are. Claire's whole body had gone cold and still, and then it flooded warm with relief because, of course, this was Paul. This was the gentle man from the church with the gold half-moon glasses. The whole mystery, sitting down to tea, captured by an old recorder Edith had forgotten was on. She would play for him, maybe, a kindness. Asterisk here, this is you. You meant something to her. Asterisk. She listened to the 2 voices murmur for a while, the words too low to make out, the easy rhythm of 2 people who knew each other. It was the least frightening thing on any of the tapes. It was almost beautiful. She let it play to the end, and at the very end, before the reel ran out, the man's voice came clear for just a moment, closer to the recorder, as if he'd leaned toward it, as if, for 1 second, he knew it was there. It was not the voice from a phone. Claire played it again, and again. She had spoken to Paul for 11 minutes that afternoon. She knew his voice, the careful softness of it, the slight catch. This was not that man. This was a different voice entirely, younger, and it said her grandmother's name with an intimacy that the man from the church, a man who looked in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, had not had and could not have had. She sat on the floor of her apartment with the tape in her hands, and she understood 2 things at once, and could not make them fit, and never would. That a kind man named Paul had looked after her grandmother, and that this was true, and that she had spoken to him, and he had explained everything, and that someone else had also been in that house, in the evenings after Paul went home, someone Edith had also greeted as though she'd been waiting, someone who knew where the spare key used to be, someone the tapes had been trying, in their failing way, to name. The list of explanations was complete. That was the part she kept returning to in the quiet moments, in the 10 seconds after a light goes out. Every single thing could be explained. The disease, the loneliness, Paul, the cups, the step, the matches. Every item on the list had an answer, and the answers were true, and the answers were kind. She thought, some stories are complete because nothing was wrong. She thought, and some stories are complete because someone made very sure that every loose thing got an explanation. She never played the tape for anyone. She told her mother about Paul, the nice man from the church, and her mother cried a little and said how glad she was that Edith hadn't been alone. Claire agreed that it was a comfort. It was a comfort. She let it be one. She kept the box on the high shelf of her own closet behind the blankets, the way her grandmother had kept it. She did not add to it. She did not throw it away. Sometimes late, in her own quiet apartment, when the building has gone still and the refrigerator is the loudest thing in the world, she catches herself listening. Not for anything in particular. Just listening in the way you do when you've learned that the worst thing a house can do is be too quiet. She is always a little relieved, and she has stopped examining why when nothing knocks. This story has no source, no Reddit post, no name, no number you could call to check it. It was made up, which again is either a comfort or it isn't, depending on what you do with the quiet after the lights go out. Be kind to the old people at the ends of roads. Most of what they tell you is true. The hard part is that some of it is true too. New episodes here every Tuesday and Friday. Subscribe, and you'll be there when the next one starts.